Hello, everyone. I'm Nina Collins. I'm the Chief Creative Officer at Revel. This is our weekly podcast recording for our podcast, Raging Gracefully, which we record live. So there'll be members in the audience who may ask questions, and you guys feel free to write stuff in the chat, and I will totally get to your question. But mostly it's going to be a conversation between me and Marcia Mantell and Sam Zimmerman. And we're here today to talk about the gender gap in retirement. I met Sam a few months ago. He is you have the distinction, Sam, of being one of the very few men I've ever interviewed at Revel. We pretty much only interview women, and they're usually women in our demographic. But we're very excited to have you. So I met Sam over the summer, and he's the founder of a startup called Sagewell. He's currently the CEO of Sagewell, and he describes it as a bank he built for his mom, and you'll hear more about that from him. Prior to this, Sam was the co-founder of Freebird, a General Catalyst backed consumer fintech startup, which was acquired by Capital One. And he was the CTO of PathCheck Foundation, the world's largest nonprofit open sourced project for COVID-19 contact tracing, which was the official app in 5 US states. So basically he's like a wunderkind. He's a very smart young tech guy who started this thing called Sagewell, which is really all about helping retirees, helping people in our demographic, well, a little older than me, but as we verge toward retirement, deal with our money. And Marcia was just telling me, so Marcia has been doing financial advising for over 30 years. She's basically an expert on the retirement space. And I guess Sam found Marcia because she was working at Fidelity, working in working in that subject, and she's now a consultant at Sagewell. So hi guys, welcome. Thanks, Nina. Is there anything you want to add to your bios before we dive right in?
No, that was exceptional.
That was enough? Okay. All right. So Sam, let's start with you because I think Sagewell is really, really interesting. So can you just tell us why you started this and what the general idea is?
Yeah. I've worked in financial technology for like the past 9 years, and I had just sold my company Capital One, and the pandemic was going on, and my mom was a teacher of 38 years, and during the pandemic, she was like, I think now's a good moment to retire. And she'd kind of been on the line for a little. I'm an entrepreneur, like I can't sit still and I look for problems. And when as I was helping her kind of figure out what her retirement looked like, I was like, wow, there's a lot here. There's kind of not obviously anyone besides myself who's helping her connect the dots. And so I was an entrepreneur on the sidelines.
What were the problems you saw, and how old is your mom?
So my mom just turns, she's 64. Okay. She retired at 62 or 60. Yeah, she was right at 62. And so at that point so the first thing is that we lived paycheck to paycheck for most, like she raised 4 kids on a Pennsylvania teacher's salary. And so, which is astounding. And retirement actually just brought with it for her a whole new set of financial problems. So the first is that like she had a lump sum payment from her sick days, $200,000, that for her was, I mean, it is huge. And, she didn't
know what to do with it.
She didn't know what to do with it. And so it was a big mindset shift in terms of kind of being comfortable with like thinking about whether the money is liquid or not liquid, like thinking about what sort of interest or return to expect over what time. And like similarly, she was filing for Social Security or thinking about filing for Social Security. She actually did, which I think Marcia has some interesting things to say about that.
So as opposed to waiting and letting it build a little bit more and doing it a few more years later. Okay, so she was getting a lump sum payment for sick days, and then was there also had she saved for retirement? No, she was living paycheck to paycheck.
She was living paycheck to paycheck. And so
was there a pension?
Yeah, so Pennsylvania teachers have a really great pension. In fact, my mom is fortunate in that she actually transitioned into a really strong, like a stronger financial footing in some ways, kind of with an empty nest and a pension and Social Security, and now $200,000. That so is it
Christmas? She was kind of psyched, it sounds like.
Yeah, exactly. And so it was for her, I think it was this moment where she was asking a lot of questions, like, what should this money do? A question she never had to think about or ask before. And so it was, for me, it was a kind of figuring out. She actually, this is surprising, but like the amount of money and the school didn't tell her, like, hey, there's a $200,000 coming. She kind of knew she was saving something. She didn't know how big it was going to be. She didn't know when it was going to get paid. And so it was like, when I had the conversation with her for 2 or 3 years, like, are you ready to retire? And she would, it was hard for her to get answers. And there was no one who I think there was no one. There was a person who came by the school, just like turns out a financial advisor that like was friendly with the school, who would,
probably tried to sell her an annuity.
Exactly. And so it was, he didn't come by very often. And she had trouble kind of accessing and getting a question there. And the front office, like, they didn't really have anything. They weren't being particularly helpful. And so I stepped in and had those conversations, and we kind of made the budget and talked a lot about kind of what risk tolerance she was comfortable with, as well as, she was figuring out healthcare was another thing for her. Like, she just retired, and she was she had a couple of years. She's not 65 yet, so she wasn't enrolling into Medicare. So it was
so she was going to have to pay for that somehow separately on her own.
Yeah, and until
so a lot of questions, and that your dad, there was no husband or whatever partner in the picture. She was on her own.
Yeah, she was.
Right. And so this is a picture lots and lots and lots of women will face and are facing every day, right? I mean, your mother is lucky compared to a lot of people, right? Because a lot of people have very little savings, particularly women. But still, she's someone who lived paycheck to paycheck her whole life. And now suddenly she has to figure out a lot of stuff, and she doesn't have anyone really to explain it to her. So this made you think what?
Well, speaking, I guess, emotionally, it was like she had spent her whole life thinking about everyone else, and so it was in some ways tricky, hard, and complicated to have someone else help think about these things or help her. And I think a lot of the company for me, or a lot of the opportunity here, is to try to do that for others. So that I say that just because I think that's a lot of what motivates a lot of our team here, is just for a lot of the folks who we're trying to help, it's something they haven't had the time or the space to think about. And so it needs to be, I think starting from there is kind of our why.
It's beautiful. I mean, it's so important. And you clearly, it's really a great story, because it's very moving. It's clearly, very much your story. And also, of course, older people often get taken advantage of, right? As we talked about, like the guy who comes by the school to help people invest their $200,000 windfall. And not that they're, I'm sure some of them are crooks, and some of them are just people who are getting a commission, and they sell things that may not be the right thing, the best thing. So, and Marcia, I'm going to get to you because I know you have lots of opinions about this, but I just want Sam briefly, if you would, just explain kind of in a nutshell what Sagewell is.
So yeah, Sagewell is the first and only banking built specifically to help older adults enter and navigate retirement. Our hope is to be the banking that that helps you connect the dots across your Social Security, your pension, your long-term care planning, your estate and will planning, and most importantly, as you just mentioned, to protect you from the fraud that is specifically targeting you, given the fact that a lot of our population, our demos, is going online. They are using technology really at about the amount every other generation is using it, but they're being differentially targeted for fraud. So we think the financial needs of this population are massive and interconnected, and it's as simple as just building the banking that our parents deserve, building banking that that helps young retirees navigate their finances.
Nice. And how does it differ from like a regular bank? Like, I mean, it almost sounds like there should be like a social service component to it. Like, is it that you get an advisor you can talk to? Like, how does it work?
Yeah. So our vision is we had this thing, and when we saw it, we couldn't unsee it. So that's kind of, I described the why and the mission, but the vision is really your entire working life. The vast majority of Americans interact with their employer, and while bosses are really annoying and frustrating, and a lot of people are very happy to retire, the employers, in particular in the US, fills a really big role for these people. They make their paycheck, they do help you with taxes, they help you figure out healthcare.
Yeah.
If you're breastfeeding, your employer now is helping make that easier for to occur in your workplace. So the role of the employer in employee health and wellness keeps expanding.
Yeah, it's very personalistic in a way. I'm like you, I'm a lifelong entrepreneur, so I've rarely worked for a company, and I'm now working at Revel. And it's, there are really nice things about working at a company, the team and someone taking care of stuff. I hear you.
And so we think that when you enter retirement, we kind of want to be the best parts of that without the worst parts of that. So we kind of want to be payroll and benefits for retirement when our members are boss.
Very smart. So I guess in theory, like I retire and I sign up with Sagewell. I feel like I'm selling Sagewell. I'm not actually trying to sell Sagewell, guys. I'm just really interested in Sagewell. I think it's a cool business. So I go to you, and then I funnel my Social Security to my account, and I funnel my pension if I'm lucky enough to have one, or my savings. And then can I set it up that I just get like one payment, and I can also do investing through you? And
exactly. So we're actually launching in days to weeks our investment services. You direct all your different retirement related income streams into your Sagewell account. We have budgeting software that makes that paycheck, and then we actually advance it. The other thing about a lot of these retirement payments is like you're paid last business day. Social Security pays second, third, and fourth Wednesday of the month based on your birthday. It's these like kind of weird, not consistent, not interconnected, at least to the customer. They are interconnected to the tax person, income streams. And so by joining Sagewell, you direct those accounts. We streamline those, so you kind of get paid the 1st and the 15th. The same amount. You get paid more regularly, more consistently, and there's a budget
to manage all these things that are kind of confusing for you suddenly because you've never had to do it before. You've had a paycheck your whole life.
Exactly. And whether it's intelligent to kind of as a planning instrument, it's your paycheck that is, you're paying yourself now, but that is, also helping make sure that you're going to pay yourself in 10, 20, 30 years. So it's a delightful experience. They get their money early. It provides consistency, and it also is a planning tool. It allows you to think, allows our members to think and make sure that they're confident what they're paying themselves is going to last as long as they need. It's
going to last as long as they're in the need. Very cool. Okay, so Marcia, tell us a little bit about your involvement with Sagewell and how you help and what your thoughts are on this subject, particularly around women and retirement.
Well, sure. Thanks, Nina. And Sam, I just love to hear how you talk about your mother.
I know, it's so sweet.
She is clearly so important. I could only wish that my two girls would, say those same wonderful things about me.
I know. We all want to bring you home for Christmas, Sam. It's very sweet.
It's really true. But I met Sam's partner first, his business partner, through a phone call. Jeff saw my name in an article about Social Security in the New York Times, and I live in the Boston area. My office is in Plymouth. And so out of the clear blue, I get a call or an email, whatever, and I strike up this conversation with these two young men. And I was really pretty dazzled because I hate to admit, after 30 years in the retirement industry and financial services, it's easy to become a little frustrated or a little put out at the direction the industry is going.
Mhm.
Though I get it, you know, I'm a business person too. And so I get that you've got to drive a business, but we're leaving behind the boomers. The technology chasm is gigantic and growing by the minute. We're computer savvy, our generation, but we're not always tech savvy.
Yeah.
And the financial services world is now called fintech. You know, it's not even about you. Your investments are in doing investing as a secondary category to the technology. Well, that's not intuitive to
No.
those of us who didn't grow up with a phone in our back pocket. You know, ours were attached to the wall with a coil. So I was so enamored with Sam and Jeff and what they're doing with this company, especially their, I'll call it their hunger to understand boomer women, that we are just different, not bad, just different. And they were willing to take the time and to ask the questions. I mean, they both have mothers, so you know that's your starting point, but not all boomers are the same, and they recognize that out of the gate. But then we do have some common issues and common problems, and one of them is going from a lot of times a weekly paycheck to a once a month Social Security deposit. You know, that's not, if you didn't ever have that, it's really hard to stretch that amount of money. First of all, it's not that much money, but then to try to stretch it through 30 days when it, you know, dropped in your bucket on the 8th or the 15th. So it's this transition that you're talking about, Sam. The industry's been trying to do it, and it's all under retirement income planning. Well, let me tell you, in 1992, when I started in this business, we were doing retirement income planning. So 30 years later, and the industry still doesn't have it right. So where Sam found this opportunity or saw that there's still this problem to be solved, which really shouldn't be a problem to be solved. It should have been solved, and it isn't. That he was able to create this kind of this happy and comfortable place for boomer women in particular. Though I'm sure men are more than welcome in this environment.
Is it mostly for women? Actually, I'm curious. I don't know. Sagewell has just launched, right? How long have you been in business?
So yeah, we've been around for about 9 months. And we have thousands of customers at this point, and the customers, the demographics are about approximately 70-30.
Okay.
So it's greater than the demographics, but it's not specifically targeting
well, I would guess that's become because traditionally more men in families manage the money and feel more confident about it. And it's not surprising to me at 70-30. Is it FDIC insured, by the way?
It is FDIC insured. We're also FINRA registered, and have a high rating by the Better Business Bureau. So it's
Nice.
I think one of our, and this kind of touches on, I think, the unique some of the unique needs that we noticed specifically for women is that like we set about kind of trying to we really wanted to start from a needs-based or a user-based approach. And what we found is that a lot of our customers had already, a third of them had already been victims of fraud.
Oh, wow.
Not like this isn't theoretical at all. And then I think 56% of them regarded as their highest, like their biggest fear. And so for us, it's not just FDIC insured. I think that's a logo. There's a regulatory structure, but for instance, we do password monitoring. So a lot of our folks, they're really concerned about this, and so we actually see if their password's been hacked on other websites, which is it's just something that's available, and then encourage them to change that password to protect. We educate them on there's a thing called two-factor authentication. And so we spend a lot of time making sure that that's a requirement actually to use our account. So we're
Interesting. So there's a really big focus on fraud prevention and security. Like that seems like a real, this actually makes me wonder, so that it sounds like in a lot of ways, your platform is directed toward kind of the more vulnerable, a more vulnerable population, but it makes me wonder, is Sagewell also appropriate for women who have more assets, women who haven't just lived paycheck to paycheck their whole lives? I mean, I would still think there's huge need still for organizing all this stuff.
Yeah, we actually track surprisingly consistent with the average retirement income distribution. So we do have a number of members. So as part of when a member joins, they kind of we do this my paycheck and budgeting exercise, but they're also assigned a specific retirement advocates. This is not a fiduciary, but this is a kind of like a souped up retirement focused bank teller is what I would call it.
Nice.
And some of our demo loves just, getting their money earlier. That's a very simple value prop for folks. The second, I think, is that retirement advocate, that just like the person to talk to about these various questions. A lot of folks, their financial advisor just isn't interested in fielding those questions.
Right.
And then the third reason is that fraud protection. So I would say that we're pretty, when I went in, I was expecting us to skew more mid-market, but a lot of folks across wealth and income are resonating with that.
Great, that's really interesting. And Marcia, what's your role with the company mostly? How do you see yourself helping this project?
Truly in a consulting manner to be there to address any questions and concerns about the boomer generation in general. But also I've been invited in a few times to do some webinars. I do a fair amount of direct to consumer education. And one of the best parts, I think, Sam, probably there's great technology, that I don't understand, but what I love that you all are doing is bringing education to your clients and your members. And it's in all forms. So I love the fraud prevention pieces.
Yeah.
A lot of times older people think that by keeping their checkbook and writing checks is the safest way to go. Well, it's not the safest way to go anymore. So
it's not.
Technology.
Was that?
No, for people, snatching checks, getting lost. You end up in collections when things don't get where they need to go. So it's more of a hassle.
I use like PayPal and Zelle. Well, actually, I don't like PayPal, but I use Zelle and Venmo a lot. And I definitely, like, my boyfriend's 10 years older than I am. He's 63 and I'm 53. And he, like a lot of people like won't use Venmo. He like thinks it's, unsafe or dangerous. Like all that kind of education is hugely important.
It really is, because it is so different from the opportunities and the way of doing business that we all grew up with.
Yeah.
So it's so important. If you're going to have these tech platforms, you also have to make them approachable. And that's a piece, so I'll evaluate or take a look at where I have an account at Sagewell as well. And so I can see what's going on. But I love that they're bringing education in all kinds of topics to the consumer. So whether it's getting ready to retire and thinking about that transition that Sam's mom went through, I do that, Social Security and Medicare. And frankly, Medicare is the big beast. I mean, that thing is so complicated. And
yeah, how do you even get involved in Medicare? Like, I don't think of Medicare as a banking issue.
How do you education on Medicare? Because I think the single most shocking piece of information for people moving into retirement, so they're 65 and older, is that Medicare is not free. It doesn't cover all of your costs, and your Social Security check is docked before you ever get it.
I didn't know
Medicare
any
Part
of this.
B premiums.
I didn't know any of that.
See? Yes, exactly.
Wow. How much does Medicare cost?
Well, if you're standard, as in you don't have high income in retirement, this year, 2022, it's $170.10 per person per month.
Okay.
You can go up to as high as $600 and change per person per month if you're in the super wealthy, super income. And the new premiums just came out yesterday. They're about $5 less. then.
Okay, so yeah, I
2022.
mean, these are things, or like long-term care insurance. Like, do you guys do education about long-term care insurance? And another question I have actually is, if people aren't retired yet, but say you're in your 50s, is Sagewell something that might be interesting for you as a place to just bank and then know that as you go into your older years, you're going to be taken care of? Or is it really better for people who are on the verge of retirement or retiring?
So the first thing I would say is health and wealth as you get older, like really are connected. And I think part of the like deep truth, in our opinion, about the payroll and benefits pitch is that we talked a lot of customers, particularly the wealthier customers who, moved money around the wrong way, and their social, like their Medicare premiums went up, and no one is taking responsibility for recognizing that via our tax system, your social security, the way you're moving your money around and the way you're realizing income has an impact on the healthcare premiums you'll pay. And so they are governmentally connected, and no, your bank, of course, would never say that. And that's why we think that there really is thinking about these two things together is.
Yeah, I had no idea. And I guess this is something in a perfect world your accountant would let you know. But a lot of
no, they don't really have any reason to know about Medicare premiums. They're really looking at income. And if it doesn't show up on one of those lines on the front of your 1040,
they don't care, right? They're not thinking about it.
It's beyond the scope. And that's, I think, part of what Sam has identified is, and it's funny, they talk about connecting the dots at Sagewell, and I write a column in ThinkAdvisor called Connecting the Dots. So independently, we've come up with this. There is no one person in the industry, but we think a place like Sagewell is a great place. And not even, ideally, it would be a financial advisor, but there's too much to know. And if they're trying to make your money grow and do what it needs to do in a tax efficient way, that's a gigantic skill set right there.
Yeah, that's a job. Yeah.
Layer on Social Security rules and Medicare rules and connecting the dots and the tax rules for those over 65. It's too much.
It's actually fascinating. I mean, it does seem kind of crazy that no one else has done this. Do you guys have competition? Who would you say your competition is?
I think the closest. So I should qualify that for the very wealthiest, someone does connect the dots often.
Team.
Yeah, exactly. There's a whole team of people.
Yeah.
And so I think part of what we're trying to do is, in a technology forward way, in an operationally deeply efficient way, provide that for a lot larger part of the population. So I do think it is like, if you are very wealthy, Fidelity has retirement right. I mean, if you have an estate lawyer and you have a financial advisor and you have a great accountant and you have like a whole team of people that you kind of coordinate, but that is, most people do not have that, needless to say. Yeah. And I think once we saw payroll and benefits, we couldn't unsee it. Like it really is a clear what I feel, both kind of deeply confused about why this hasn't existed. My best explanation is that banking kind of started as a lot of like your town had a couple banks. Often those banks are tied to a town or an ethnicity. And part of what's happening in this digital era is that banking is reaching all sorts of identities. Part of the fintech revolution is, there's a bank for small businesses. There's a bank called Daylight for LGBT individuals.
Oh, wow. I didn't know
that. And so we think that, by having, it'd be harder for a specific geography to have a bank than specifically for retirees. But as you go online, as the way in which we relate to our finances has a lot richer sense of identity, we think maybe that's why no one has done it yet. But if I'm honest, I sometimes wake up and I'm like, well, how, like, am I missing something? Like it really seems like really
that's a classic entrepreneurial feeling, right? Like we feel this way all the time at Revel. Like, obviously this is important. Does not everyone see how important this is? But when just to clarify for our listeners, when you say the payroll and benefits piece, you couldn't unsee it, because I just want to make sure everyone really understands that. You mean this idea that you can help people continue, you can wrap it up in one place where you can keep them on a payroll, even though they're retired, give them a regular paycheck, and help manage their benefits, right? As
Yeah,
opposed to them doing it on their own.
exactly. And I think, yeah, like, and more so than that, that there's an institutional gap in the US. As a result of this, I mean, it's a very deliberate strategy by the US to make the employer, the corporation, the preeminent institution in America today. It's not our government, it's not our families. The employer, the corporation, is the major way in which is the kind of preeminent institution. And it's great. I mean, we have like mental health is now, a major part of these platforms, and we have a loneliness epidemic in older adults. The needs are being well met by the employer, by the corporation, and there's just no analogical institution for your most vulnerable years of your life. Whenever a spouse passes away, you need to take over your finances. Whenever you're all sorts of, there's a lot of really important, complicated things that happen in older age, particularly around health and wealth. And so as these things get more involved, as your health is driving a lot of your expenses, and as you lose the institution that was connecting those dots. So that's what we mean by payroll and benefits for retirement. We think there's an institutional gap in America today that differentially makes people entering retirement, the average person entering retirement, not as well situated to navigate the challenges they're facing.
Yeah, no, that sounds really smart. And also, I can't help but think about how the gig economy, I mean, the whole reliance on an institution and a job has really changed in the last 20 years, and looks like it's going to continue to be changing, right? It's much less likely that a woman like your mother, who will have one employer for 40 years, people are moving around. And so this whole idea of also banks that are getting more niche is super interesting. I want to make sure we get to these two questions in the chat. Judith asks, does your bank deal with US citizens having US retirement but live abroad? I would think yes, because it's digital.
Yeah, we have we care about like tax status and but yes, you can definitely do that.
And then what about that question that I asked before about women in their 50s or 40s or 20s? Like, at what point would you say, no, you're too young for Sagewell? Or, kind of how do you think about that?
So we, our mean age has been consistently decreasing month over month. And so I haven't run the numbers most recently, but it's around 63. So pre-Medicare. I think empirically what we're seeing is that people are like, they're working, they're living their lives. And then they enter this period where they're like, I think I'm ready to retire. I'm really thinking about retiring. And they start to make a plan. And so what we found is that for folks who are, for my mom, it was the pandemic happening. She had her full retirement for a while. And it was just this sort of thing where it's like, is it this year? Is it next year? There's this kind of, you get to the phase where you're asking the question seriously and you start to make the plan. And I think that we are most natural for folks who are doing that. We actually have one person, she's a vet, and she's full retirement at 45, and she loves our services.
Wow, very cool. Okay, so it's not really about age, it really is about retirement. Your relationship to retirement is when this makes sense.
Exactly. And we can create we can help make like, if you have 5 years left before you're going to retire, there's a lot more we can do to help make that plan stronger. Than someone who's kind of, the moment they're retiring, many of them have made a plan. It might not be, the plan we would have advocated for, but so for us, we've actually moved younger and younger, given that retirement really is kind of a state of mind and something
some people talk about, sorry to interrupt you, but someone just saying to me the other day that retirement doesn't really exist anymore.
So that's another, so we did this survey, 67% of retirees plan on working in retirement. It is the quote I've heard is, and I think that there's a variety of reasons. I think it's, there's financial reasons for that, but a lot of folks are looking for the quote I heard is that, a member said it is like, there's no days off in retirement. And so people really are, people are finding like ways to fill their day as well as make income. And I think that, what retirement means is actually, I think, highly dynamic, highly changing. And the fact that most retirees are going to work is an oxymoronic truth, I would say.
Really interesting. And so in some ways, a good time also to go to Sagewell is when you're approaching thinking about claiming your Social Security, I suppose. So Marcia, what are your thoughts on that?
I think it's so important that people learn about Social Security, the rules, not like to be a professional, but know that there are consequences to their decisions. Because what I see out there is everybody knows Social Security's pearly gates open when you turn 62, and they all want in. They think it's going bankrupt. They think they need the money. It's not going to be there for them when their full retirement age, which is closer to 67 now, when that rolls around. And none of that is correct. And what they don't understand as well is that once you claim, it's pretty much an irrevocable decision. So if you jump in at 62, you are stuck with the lowest monthly income you could ever have from Social Security.
Oh, interesting. So I don't know any of this. So because I'm 53 and I haven't been educated in this. So the longer you wait, the higher it goes up. And so you
up until age 70.
Up until age 70. So you advocate people waiting as long as they possibly can.
Well, you want to find a balance. Waiting till 70 doesn't work for most people. I mean, it's fine if you're going to keep working and you don't need the money. Great, then get your maximum payment. But it's really interesting. I'll be interested to talk to you again when you turn 60. As I mentioned to you earlier, I'm 61. There are fundamental switches that go off in your head when you turn 50, 55, 60. And you're much older, you're much more tired. Your employer does not want you. So I agree with everything Sam had to say, that the employers are highly influential in people's pocketbooks, but they're also willing to show you the door. So there's this real push-pull situation that we as workers need to be aware of and need to have plans for. Whether it happens or not, it's another story, but we can't be so surprised when we get north of 50 for women and north of 55 for men, and we're shown the door. That's just the reality of corporate America today. So if you're not prepared for that, then you make bad decisions, and those bad decisions stick with you for your entire retirement.
Right. They really matter.
That's a problem.
Yeah. And people are living longer and longer. And that's the whole long-term care insurance issue. There's so many things to talk about. Well, one of my takeaways here is about education. Like, it does seem really important that Sagewell is doing all this education, and that you, Marcia, do all this writing. And I feel like we at Revel should be doing more, publishing more articles about this stuff, because it's really important. There's clearly a huge gap of knowledge. Do you guys do a newsletter, Sam?
We do. It's written by a woman who had worked at Fidelity for 40 years, and I think it's very high quality. We have a couple of customers, not more than a couple, several, who most love our newsletter.
How nice! And does it go out every week?
So we do it every quarter, actually. At this point, it's a little larger, more substantial, and I think it covers a lot of the issues. I think, and this is another reason that we have a lot of customers that really understand our value prop, is we have a lot of people. Our most popular articles are actually about caregiving. These are folks who are kind of 50 to 70 who are taking care of their parents, and so they're like, well, I'm having to figure out and become a financial advisor and do all this stuff for my parents. And well, I'd like, they understand the value that Sagewell is providing intuitively. And so we have our newsletter, I think, is aimed at a lot of what our customers resonate with in that 50 to 70 range. And it's caregiving as much as it is retirement.
I want your newsletter. I want a Sagewell account. This is super cool. All right. Well, we tend to make these podcasts around 30 to 45 minutes, so we should probably wrap up, even though I think we could talk forever. Are there, let's see, Judith in the chat asks about a Roth IRA or a 401k, And I asked, what exactly do you mean? And she says she doesn't have any retirement savings yet. So should she open one of those things?
So we, in days to weeks, we will offer a Roth IRA that customers can create on our platform alongside our checking account. So we view kind of, so the short answer is, members almost always benefit by having and maintaining those additional savings. And that's part of why we added it to our platform so early. So we do offer that, and that I think is a really useful and important thing for folks entering retirement. Look for an announcement on our website and platform in the next little bit.
Nice. I'm also wondering, the retirement advocates, this is just kind of a business question, but I guess you're planning on scaling that. I mean, that seems like it could be a hard thing. How much time do the retirement advocates, I guess they're like customer service people, but you have a dedicated one. So if you have millions and millions of customers.
Yeah, so we, a couple of things. Our customers are very, we're not building a bank for yet for 85 or 90-year-olds. These are folks who, like, our customer, they champion email. They're very open-minded, very digitally savvy, and we've found that customer, that member, only really asks whenever they have help, and they're not like looking for their
You need hand-holding, really.
Exactly. And so I think that part of what we've done is we've instrumented it to be highly operationally efficient.
I was about to say, if you have a really good product, it tells them what they need to know, right?
Exactly. And then the second thing I would say is just that, these services have, they've had bank tellers for a very long time. They've had financial advisors for a long time. By leveraging technology, we can do so very operationally efficiently. And we use some of that margin, some of the money we make, to have it be a specific person. And for our customers, that means a lot. So I remember Marcia, whenever we were telling her about this, she like, I don't know, will the math work? The spreadsheet does work, but it does rest on taking a lot of the, leveraging the fact that we don't have physical locations, that where our cost basis is quite a bit lower in certain ways, and reinvesting that in ways that are valuable to our customer.
Really great. I feel the same way I felt when I first met you. I'm just so impressed. We could obviously, again, talk forever, but is there anything that I've missed that you guys want to make sure we cover for our listeners?
I will say something that Marcia knows far better than me, which is there's a topic we didn't talk about is there's a huge difference gender-wise with respect to retirement. We did this survey, and there is just massive delta between how confident they are in their plan, how well they feel prepared, like across every single dimension. I think, and actually more so than wealth and income, gender is actually explaining like a massive amount of, like, it is not the have and have nots. It is the men and women. And so my last comment would just be that they're part of why we're building what we're building for who we're building it for is because there is a lot of need and a lot of good work to do. And we wrote a paper, like we asked some questions, but that just hits.
We did a blog post based on your report, which Sydney just put in the chat. And you're right. I mean, this whole conversation was supposed to be more about the gender gap in retirement, but I really wanted to understand what you're doing. Sorry, Wendy asks for the website for Sagewell. I assume it's sagewellfinancial.com. But yeah, let's talk for just a couple minutes about this. Why is there such a huge gap? I mean, and is it changing for younger women? Is it a historical gap? I mean, confidence, knowledge. I mean, obviously women earn more money, women live longer.
Women earn less money and live longer.
Okay.
And that wage entry point, how much you make when you start your career, dogs you for most women throughout your career. And then add on.
Wait, what do you mean? What do you mean by that? Like the fact that you're earning low money when you start?
That you start, and then if you get a raise, say everyone gets a 5% raise, well, you get a 5% raise on a much smaller base than your male counterparts. And that largely has not gone away. we're making more progress now recently than we did for my generation.
I know
But
one of
it's
my,
really slow.
yeah, one of my, I have four kids, and one of my 24-year-old daughters just got a job yesterday at Universal in LA. And she was kicking herself afterwards that she didn't negotiate enough for her salary. And I was kicking myself for not urging her to negotiate more. Yeah, it's very slow to change.
It really is. It's very difficult to change, but that means you have less being attributed for your future Social Security. You have less to build raises on. And then to make matters worse, it is having children. I only have two, but those years that you step out of the workforce for even just a couple of months of maternity leave, it then affects your bonus that year. It kind of resets your level to a lower level than than the dads who didn't have that same experience. So
Right.
it is something that really does impact women for their entire careers,
It's
and then
insidious.
well into retirement. So,
And then
And
what
I would,
about, oh, go ahead, Sam.
the way I've come to think of this is the retirement of today is this is looking back in the past 30 or 40 years about the problem. Like the decisions we're making today, best case scenario in our retirement system will be reaping the benefits of in 30 years. And so for a lot of our customers, I'm dealing with and seeing the problems of decisions that were made in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. And so to me, our retirement is N-30 of the state of affairs. And it means that our changing today is it's all the more important to act more quickly.
Yeah.
and
Wow.
everything in retirement is legal. It's all based in the law. So there were the laws that were created. Well, Social Security 1935, they got amended from time to time, but not enough to keep up with the modernization of the people and the opportunities with the jobs. As you mentioned, Nina, the gig economy. How is that really going to play out? Well, we won't know for 25 more years.
Got it.
For the boomers, our situation was we grew up, the early boomers especially, thinking they were going to have a pension. And that's great. Some of them still do have a pension, but many fewer than they thought. So it was really the rug got pulled out right during their most critical. They missed their most incredible opportunities to save because there were no savings opportunities. The 401k wasn't invented until 1978 and came into play in 1982.
Oh,
well, that was fine for me, a young boomer, but for those born in 1946, they are 20 years older. They were already 40. You missed out on your 20s and your
years
30s.
of, yep.
You can never catch up, but
That is really helpful, thinking about it as N-30. Like that's really interesting. Well, you guys are great. I love what you're doing. I hope everyone listening has learned a lot, and we want to continue supporting you and getting out the word as you grow. So are you having trouble growing? How are you growing? Sorry, I keep wanting to ask more questions. Like, what's your biggest challenge?
Our biggest challenge actually is making sure that we're maintaining the quality of our product and adding the appropriate features at the right time. By that I mean, like, the vision that I outlined, the gap is so big, and making sure that we are solving the most pressing problems for our customers. And maybe right now we don't have a lot of services for someone 75 to 85, but that will come. And so I think our biggest problem is prioritizing and solving our customers' most pressing problems.
So product roadmap.
Which is, and it's many problems I've worked on, many entrepreneurial problems I have are very well defined. And this one is listening to your customer and figuring out what next feature to add is for us the hardest, because it's a market sizing question, it's a need question, it's a growth question. And so I think that's the one that we spend most of our time thinking about. It's the response, and we've been growing at a healthy pace. That's actually, it hasn't been as much of the challenge. It's building iteratively.
Great. Well, it's really exciting. I can't wait to see where you are in 5 years. I'm very glad to know you, and really glad to meet you both, meet Marcia for the first time. And thank you, everyone. So check out sagewellfinancial.com. Always write to me with any questions if anyone needs more information. Nina at Hello Revel. Do you guys have an Instagram? Do you do things like that? Should we follow you?
Yes, we're on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. Facebook is where a lot of our members first interact with us. So
Okay.
definitely tweet us, tag us on Instagram, shoot us a message on Facebook. We're very much still a digital bank, and so would love to meet with folks via any digital channel.
That's awesome. All right. Well, thanks, you guys. Have a great week. Really fun to talk to you.
Thanks. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks, Nina.
All right. Take care. Bye-bye.